Imagine rewriting decades of global trade overnight. No fanfare, no chest-thumping press blitz, just a quiet revolution. That's precisely what happened when Canada inked a record-breaking trade and strategic partnership with the EU, and Mark Carney made it clear, this is only the opening act. While others cling to old alliances betrayed by ego and populism, Canada is building a new transatlantic powerhouse, one rooted in shared values, cutting-edge innovation, and commitment to a secure, sustainable future at a time when the world's rules are unraveling. This is more than a deal. It's a blueprint for the next era. When negotiators quietly signed the summit communique, they weren't just adding signature lines. They were forging new trade corridors, harmonized digital standards, and joint defense investments in an era where cybersecurity threats and geopolitical flashpoints proliferate like wildfire. Carney frames it as the most European of non-European countries, building a partnership that spans justice, climate, digital regulation, research, education, defense, and energy. He sees Canada as a bridge between continents, a nation that understands European caution, but also North American entrepreneurship. This partnership is a response to global turbulence, from Russian aggression to financial instability to tech wars over data sovereignty. The deal isn't a reaction. It's a proactive insurance policy for democracy.
If you're done watching corrupt elites rig the system and leave you behind, subscribe now. If you want real talk, raw truth, and zero spin, this is your channel. If you're ready to fight back, hit that subscribe button and stand with us.
When Canada and the EU agreed to co-invest in defense research, it wasn't just about tanks or drones. It was a recognition that tomorrow's threats are hybrid. Cyber hacks on critical infrastructure, deepfakes polarizing citizens, supply chain sabotage of food or energy. Synchronized R&D means resilience by design, pools of expertise ready to counter threats before they metastasize. And while some still cling to outdated 2% NATO rhetoric, Canada and its European allies are actually moving the needle on defense spending, not as virtue signaling but as practical deterrence, field-tested exercises, and shared industrial ecosystems that can scale rapidly. On trade, the agreement goes far beyond tariff reductions. It delivers regulatory alignment, common digital privacy systems, joint cyber standards, harmonized food safety protocols, shared green technology certification. That means Canadian EU supply chains can build once and sell everywhere, cutting red tape and unleashing investment. For Canadian exporters, whether clean mineral for battery factories in Germany or biotech-enhanced wheat in France, this is a game changer. The cost of compliance evaporates. Contracts become easier. Market trust rises. Likewise, European innovators gain a safe launchpad into North American energy and raw materials networks. This interdependence isn't asymmetrical. It's mutually reinforcing. Carney didn't hide the ambition. We're forging a strategic economic alliance that spans defense, digital governance, trade, and climate. He told the summit. He called out the fragility of the rules-based order and urged partners not to simply bandage cracks, but to rebuild the foundation. That means collaborating on green hydrogen corridors between Canadian provinces and the EU, joint AI safety protocols that guard academic freedom while boosting innovation, coordinated climate-adapted agriculture systems blending Europe's sustainability mandates with Canada's vast farmland, the EU's parallel push on sustainable finance disclosure regulation, now finds a sounding board in Canadian capital markets, meaning Canadian clean energy firms get easier access to European green capital. But there's a political win hidden in this too. Canada is positioning itself not as a junior partner, nor as a passive bystander, but as a leader who shapes the agenda, from climate diplomacy to digital taxation to strategic autonomy. The deal signals to the world that Canada can execute diplomatic heft without tipping into sanctimony, a sharp rebuke to populists who frame trade as a zero-sum contest. Even more quietly, provincial governments already building hydrogen hubs or AG tech clusters see their efforts validated on the world stage. Federal and EU funds flow into local innovation ecosystems, anchoring jobs not just in urban tech centers but across Quebec's clean energy corridors and Saskatchewan's digital agriculture pilot zones. Meanwhile, the EU gains a partner with vast resources, stable governance, and regional proximity to both Asia and North America. The deal lessens European dependence on fragile global shipping lanes or geopolitically exposed suppliers. Canadian critical minerals pipelines and energy reserves become strategic buffers in a time of rising supply chain tension. Even cultural and academic ties get a boost. Joint scholarship programs, co-taught tech curricula, exchange of top-tier researchers on pandemic preparedness or data ethics labs, all forging deeper ties beyond the transactional. Look at the timing. While much of the world dithers to protectionist impulses and domestic pressure, Canada and the EU are sprinting ahead. They aren't hostage to campaign cycles. They're building permanent institutions with joint working groups, task forces, parity frameworks, and enforcement mechanisms, not just press release pledges. This institutional backbone matters. It outlives any one leader, any one administration. It builds infrastructure of trust underpinned by legislation, technical standards, joint budgets, and regular ministerial reviews. Yes, the world is fragmented. Threats are multiplying. But it's in this moment of chaos that this deal stands out. It screams to other democracies. Shared values, trust, freedom, cooperation are more than platitudes. They're the foundation for industrial policy, digital governance, commercial resilience, climate action, and yes, even collective defense. Carney's message is clear. This is just the beginning. The record-breaking agreement is the first step in a multi-decade project, an Atlantic alliance tuned for digital era and the climate era. Canada has long been a dependable ally, peacekeeping, trade liberalization, environmental diplomacy. But this partnership with the EU elevates that reliability into strategic sovereignty, a conscious choice to stand shoulder to shoulder with Europe to rebuild global rules, not warp them to fit narrow national wins. For millions of Canadian and European businesses, for researchers and educators, for soldiers and diplomats, the message is strong, adaptation is collective, resilience is shared, and the future of innovation and defense lies in bridge continents, not isolated nations. So what comes next? Investment announcements, yes, but also joint crisis management simulations, shared AI safety regulation, economic war games against disinformation campaigns, and coordinated climate finance vehicles that pool Canadian reservoirs of green capital with EU bond markets. The alliance will also explore interoperability of defense platforms, drones, command control systems, co-labeling of low-carbon exports, and even shared digital identity frameworks, addressing privacy and mobility across borders. This is not just a trade announcement. It's the opening chapter of a transatlantic renaissance. It's not a one-off. It's a generational project that could reshape the global order at a time when fragmentation threatens every institution from supply chains to cybersecurity nets to environmental accords. Carney's phrase, just the beginning, matters because the world doesn't stop hurting, disrupting, fracturing. Leadership is judged by what's built between the crises. And Canada-EU is building an architecture for durability. The irony is palpable. While others draw battle lines in trade shows or hashtag wars, Canada and the EU quietly forge tools to manage tomorrow's challenges. They're not waiting for next week's crisis. They're defining the response frameworks, the innovation ecosystems, the shared defense posture before the storms break. So yes, record-breaking deal, historic significance, shared values reaffirmed. But the real story is what's coming next: harmonized digital regulation, advanced defense cooperation, climate finance channels, port-to-port green energy corridors, and coordinated migration of talent and research across continents. In a divided and dangerous world, this is how you protect democracy, how you secure prosperity, how you rebuild trust, and how, movie-style, you equip yourself for the next battle before it's sprung. That's the real beginning. And Mark Carney knows it. The world doesn't wait. Canada and the EU, once trading partners, now champions of a new global nexus, are swiftly laying out the architecture for a future built on resilience, trust, and shared purpose. And make no mistake, this isn't just about economics or defense. It's about preserving democratic values in an unstable world. When the ink dried on that landmark Canada-EU agreement, it didn't simply redraw trade lanes, it reconfigured geopolitical strategy. No longer is diplomacy a theater of empty promises. It's a multidimensional engine capable of uniting industries, researchers, soldiers, regulators, educators, and governments around a common mission. Why does this matter? Because the world is more volatile than at any point since the early 20th century. Hard power is increasingly meaningless without digital security. Economic stability rests on sustainable energy. Trade and trust go hand in hand. Canada and the EU recognized early that the old frameworks have failed to keep pace. They chose instead to build something new, an alliance that is as agile as it is robust, as principled as it is practical. Every day, you'll hear leaders divide the world into winners and losers, allies and rivals. But alliances aren't stumbled into by accident. They're constructed from legislative breakthroughs, joint task forces, investment vehicles, and co-governed standards. That's what Canada and the EU are doing. Design, not disaster. Unity, not us versus them. Consider joint research into AI and data ethics. Both parties realize that unchecked algorithmic warfare isn't a risk for a single border. It's a threat to every democracy. Harmonized protocols for sensitive data, shared guidelines to defend elections from disinformation, coordinated labs for quantum encryption. All of it starts now. This is where regulation meets innovation, and where scars of national pride find common cause in Secret Service digital resilience. Defense, too, goes beyond tanks and jets. Cyber resilience task forces between Canadian and European defense ministries are weaving shared infrastructure to protect everything from power grids to hospital networks. Joint procurement programs are ensuring that new technologies, from drones to satellites, can be deployed seamlessly across NATO regions. That's deterrence, and it's the fastest path from table talk to battlefield readiness. The environmental front offers another showcase of synergy. Canada's immense clean energy resources and vast forested stewardship, paired with Europe's climate finance frameworks and green bond markets. Together, they're deploying transatlantic pipelines for sustainable hydrogen, shared carbon capture R&D, and global rollout of low-emission construction materials. These industries don't just reduce emissions. They create skilled jobs, export markets, and industrial momentum that economies on both sides can ride for decades. But why should this matter to everyday citizens, not in Ottawa or Brussels, but in small towns, cities, shop floors, and classrooms? First, economic stability. Harmonized standards and mutual market access mean Canadian solar panels are competitive in Germany, while European electric buses find routes through Manitoba. Next, job creation. Multi-continent supply chains become safer, more efficient, less vulnerable to tariffs or political swings. That translates to new opportunities for engineers, logisticians, planners, and technicians, roles that rebuild local economies left behind by global fragmentation. Third, security by reciprocity. When defense budgets, intelligence sharing, and cyber protocols align, it becomes smarter and more politically expedient for adversaries to think twice. The shared burden hardens the perimeter of democratic nations. Fourth, research and education. Imagine Canadian universities and EU campuses co-launching dual degrees in sustainable agriculture or tech ethics, training a generation not in isolation, but as leaders wired into an international network. Finally, values reified. In a polarized, pandemic-scarred world, democracy, rule of law, and human dignity matter more than ever. By anchoring trade, defense, and technology to mutual respect, Canada and the EU ensure spaces of freedom endure. Spaces where a handshake over coffee means something real again, where trust is measurable, not marketable. This project is long-term. Summit after summit, agreement after memorandum, joint exercise after joint research, Canada and the EU are working tirelessly to future-proof democratic institutions, not rhetorically, but practically. Canada's hub position as a resource provider, energy exporter, global peacekeeper, makes it uniquely placed to operate as a transatlantic linchpin. It's not about being close to Europe in geography. It's about sharing a worldview and co-governing rising challenges. That's why Carney's words, "This is only the beginning," are more than political bravado. They're a strategic vision with timelines, budgets, and roadmaps. We've laid out the framework for tomorrow's global order. Now comes the test: implementation, passing budgets, building tech standards, deploying cybersecurity defenses without bureaucratic gridlock, earning public buy-in for long-haul investments in green jobs, training new specialist cadres who can operate seamlessly on both continents. The Canada-EU axis is setting the pace. Other nations will watch, and some will join, and that may reshape alliances far beyond the Atlantic. Already, emerging markets, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and even Africa are eyeing similar models, combining North-South solidarity with transatlantic security. This one 500-word adventure isn't just a story of economics or diplomacy. It's a blueprint for how advanced democracies can build lasting resilience. It's about protecting borders not by closing them, but by knitting them together in layers stronger than walls. It's about preserving autonomy by optimizing integration. And most importantly, it's about reframing power as wins for people, not just states, as securities for communities, not just capitals, as innovations for shared futures, not just profits for a few. That's the road ahead. That's what just the beginning means. Canada signs the deal today. It sets in motion a relentless cycle of collaboration, defense, innovation, and growth that reverberates across oceans, industries, and generations. Because when values drive policy, trade becomes trust, and partnerships morph into platforms for democracy's survival. Canada and the EU aren't just building a relationship. They're crafting a transatlantic safeguard for our collective future. And the world is already catching up. While world headlines spiral with crisis after crisis, what's unfolding quietly between Canada and the European Union is not chaos. It's choreography. Behind the cameras and away from the noise, this partnership is setting the new global standard for what functional democracy looks like when it decides to act with purpose. And here's what sets this deal apart. It's not reactionary. It wasn't formed in the panic of a supply chain breakdown or amid the ashes of a collapsed currency. No, this was preparation, strategic foresight. It was built on the understanding that resilience can be retrofitted after the fact. It has to be embedded in the system from the start. That's why Canada and the EU are aligning on tech governance, because if democracies don't define the ethical boundaries of AI, authoritarian regimes will. It's why they're moving fast on supply chain security, because the next shock won't ask for permission. It's why they're integrating educational standards, because a global workforce needs a shared framework, not fragmented learning silos that trap opportunity in one hemisphere. This is what we call institutional maturity. Where other nations shout into the void, Canada and the EU are writing the code of cooperation, version 2.0 of the international order. And here's the kicker. It's not exclusive. They're building a model that invites others in rather than locking them out, not through charity, but through mutual benefit, shared values, and long-term sustainability. So the next time you hear about a global summit, look beyond the handshake photos. Ask who's signing the documents, who's showing up with a vision, who's not just asking what's in it for them, but what's possible together. Right now, Canada and the EU are answering that question. And if this is just the beginning, then what comes next could redefine the future for all of us. If you believe in values that cross borders, democracy, innovation, freedom, then this is a turning point. Hit subscribe for deep dive analysis of how Canada, Europe, and like-minded nations are re-architecting the future. Don't just witness history, understand it, debate it, and demand leaders who build alliances, not walls. Your voice matters in shaping tomorrow's global order.